Hi, I'm Tessa, a veteran educator working in the field of special education.
And I'm Kim, mom of 2 autistic boys and a late diagnosed autistic person myself.
And welcome to Totally Over the Spectrum, where we dive into embracing autism through understanding and support. Welcome to episode 18, Autistic Aggression. This is a very serious subject, so if the tone is a little bit serious, forgive us in advance.
This is a topic that I hear a lot of parents discussing in different forums, right? You hear things like, I'm terrified of my 3-year-old, she bites, she hits, she screams. You see pictures posted of bruises and bite marks, and parents seem to be lost and not knowing how to tackle this.
I agree with you on that. It is... it's an overwhelming emotion. It's an overwhelming situation to be in. And for those of you who would like us to respond to any personal information, please comment or go to our Facebook page and we'll be happy to connect with you.
To tackle this, I think we need to start with the idea that every behavior happens for a reason.
Yes, every behavior has a function, and trying to find what the function of that behavior is going to be a key to unlocking and targeting aggression in children or in any situation, really.
So we'll talk about why it happens, and then after that we can talk about some strategies that you can use. So we're going to define aggression for the purposes of this podcast as behavior that is threatening or likely to cause harm. And that can be verbal, right? Like swearing or threatening another person, or it can be physical, hitting, biting, kicking, or throwing objects.
And aggression doesn't also necessarily be towards other people. It could be self-injurious too, right? So I think sometimes people also have to look at that because aggression could be involve a person being harmful to themselves. But in this particular podcast, we're going to focus on aggression towards others.
Yeah, I mean, some of the strategies will help either way because there's a lot of overlap, but yeah, okay. So there's also this this idea that all autistic people are aggressive, and that's not true. They're not. Like, my oldest son, Alex, is level 1, so he has low support needs, and he's never aggressive. He never was, right? Like, when he became overwhelmed or overstimulated or upset, he'd just cry, right? But he was never aggressive at all. Peter, who's level 3, so higher support needs, I mean, when he was really young, he'd bite Alex, but I think really he was just teething because he'd chew on wooden furniture. And he never bit hard enough to leave a mark. Like, it wasn't out of any sort of emotional overwhelm. When he was older, he would hit people, well, mostly to get them to stop singing. Also, if they were making certain noises or in his space, that was sort of his go-to. But it was never prolonged, right? And it was really easily redirected. The only other harmful action that Peter did and still does to some extent was self-harm, right? He would bang his chin, and sometimes he'd bang his chin on another person, like on their shoulder or on their arm, which is very painful. But mostly he would just do it to himself.
Yeah, I can attest to the shoulder banging
and the bruises.
Yep.
When I was young, I had a lot of rage, so I was very angry. I was too afraid of consequences to take that out on another person. Even now, when I get overstimulated, I need to release that. And usually by swearing, ranting to myself, but not at other people. So usually the kitchen sink is a really good target because there isn't anybody else in the kitchen at the time. And because I'm not harming myself with that or anyone else, I feel like that's anger and not aggression.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that point. And yes, and you're correct in saying earlier on that aggression could be verbal and emotional and physical. So it's all 3 elements, right? So you're covering, pardon the pun, the spectrum of aggression, right? Okay, so to me, aggression is is a distressful behavior, right? It's a release of distressful behavior and what is causing that behavior. So, a functional assessment of behavior is crucial to addressing aggression in behavior. So, let's pick up on your list because I know it's important for you to kind of stick with your list, and I'm pretty good about jumping in and out.
I know you are. Thank you. So the first thing I want to talk about are some risk factors, right?
Okay.
Like, let's talk about why it's happening, and then we can talk about what you can do about it. So the literature is a bit all over the place as usual, which is lovely. There are definite differences between autistic and neurotypical individuals in regard to the literature with risk factors for aggression. So I thought that that was really interesting. So in neurotypical people, some of the risk factors include, like the biggest ones, boys are more likely to be more aggressive than girls. Age can be a factor. The level of parent education and marital status. And those are not factors for autistic people.
No, they're not.
For autistic people, aggression risk factors can include not being allowed to stim, right? So that's self-regulatory behavior, not being able to communicate, having an intellectual disability, and having low adaptive functioning. And adaptive functioning is your sort of daily living skills, including communication and social skills.
Okay. So, in my experience, I came up with my top 5, right? Which I see consistently, regularly, and it's pretty much applied between your level 1, 2s, and 3s. Communication. Communication is my number one reason for aggression. The inability to effectively communicate somebody's wants and needs can lead to frustration, and from frustration can lead to being overwhelmed, and overwhelmment then can lead into releasing that distressful behavior in an inappropriate way, which results in aggression. So communication was one. Sensory, either being overstimulated or understimulated. And usually I find that it is an external factor, which is the environment in which the person is in, right? Unstructured time, right? Kids especially require, when they haven't got the skills to regulate themselves effectively, unstructured time can put them into a whirlwind, right? And when they get into that state, now all of a sudden they've got to release a lot of this, and it can result in aggressive behavior. Not malicious, but just it results in aggression. Change in routine, which ties into unstructured time, right? When you're very routine orientated, it reduces your anxiety. It allows you to regulate far better. So change in structure does do that. And lastly, there could be physical reasons in which kids can often display aggression, especially in the younger ones. And this is both for neurotypical as well as neurodivergent. Teething. Teething could be one of the main factors into kids biting when they're younger, right? They're unable to effectively tell us that there's something wrong with them. So it feels good to chew onto something or to hold. And don't forget, sometimes neurodivergent kids, a little bit lagging, in developmental stages, right? So what would normally be a kid teething at 18 months can occur anywhere between 2 and 2.5 for neurodivergent. So a little bit of a lagging skill, but nothing that is, the gap is not significant enough for it to be, set as one of these, primary concerns when you have autism.
I talked with Peter's speech and language pathologist because I was interested, because she's been an SLP for a long time, and I was interested to know if she found personally if autistic children were more likely to be aggressive than some of the other kids that she works with. And she said absolutely not. She said there's nothing in her career that she saw that would, she said communication difficulties can cause kids to be aggressive regardless.
Yes, I agree with you. And I agree with her completely. So it comes down to the fact of communication, not necessarily being a person with autism.
Right. And we talk about different stressors in episode 13, meltdowns, shutdowns, and burnout. So I'll put a link if people are interested in checking that one out. So what this all says to me is that autistic people are at a higher risk of having aggressive behavior when they aren't being understood and they're not allowed to self-regulate. And given that we are often misunderstood, like a lot of the time, and our stimming is often frowned upon a lot of the time, I'm surprised we aren't all aggressive a lot of the time.
Well put, Kimberly. Well put. Yes, I agree with that. However, in your situation with both Peter and Alex, you set firm boundaries, right? So it also comes down to setting boundaries when it comes to aggression, right? Peter and Alex were, explained that aggression is not welcomed and there would be harsh consequences to aggression.
I think you're going to have to define harsh
As
for
in,
people.
for Peter, it would be the removing of his iPad, right? The world is coming to an end, and if Peter has his iPad, the world can end, no problem. So that would be a harsh consequence. And for Alex, it would not be having access to his electronics and to his, to his world of, the web.
Right.
So,
For Alex, I never had any at all aggressive tendencies. And you're right. For Peter, it was he was 10, I think, before he ever tried to hit, and he thought it was a joke. Right. So he was like half assed, kind of trying to hit, and I just took his hands, and I was very serious, and I got in his face, and I said, "We don't hit ever. It's not funny. We're not doing this." And he sort of giggled a little bit because, mom's not usually that assertive because I don't need to be. And I did that maybe 3 times and he never hit again. Like that was it. It was like, this is a hard no. And this is not going to work in any environment. So even at school, he was with you at that time at school. And I went to you and I said, look, this is a behavior that I saw at home. If this happens at school, this needs to be shut down hard and fast. Like
yes.
There is no give on this whatsoever. I don't care what's going on.
And we had a lot of successes and a lot of achievements that we had with Peter because in a very short period of time, because our strategies mirrored each other. So what happened at school happened at home, and therefore we were able to achieve a lot of successes in a short period of time and significant successes. So mirroring is going to be one of the key strategies that we're going to talk about.
Aggressive behaviors can have more negative outcomes than just the harm that they cause in the moment. So it can negatively impact social relationships, and this is for any age of person, right? Require removal from the home, placement in residential settings if the aggression gets to be too much, require physical intervention like restraints, increase the risk of that person being victimized. It can also seriously impact other people, like educator burnout, negatively impacting the quality of education. Caregivers can experience increased stress levels, burnout, increased financial stress, lack of support services, and it can have an overall negative impact on family life.
People don't realize the domino effect of aggression if it is not addressed when it is first displayed. It has to be addressed very quickly, and it has to be addressed in every single situation. Because these kids are going to call you on it. If you're in a home environment, you're more likely to address behavior consistently and continuously, right? But when you step outside of your home, a lot of people put on their social manners and airs and graces. And they're like, oh, we can't correct our child in society, right? No. You've got to put that aside because this aggression is going to be then displayed outside of the home environment, because you're telling your child that in the home environment this does not happen, but when we're outside and you hit and kick, I'm not going to correct you because I'm embarrassed to correct you, and therefore the likeliness of that behavior to increase when you're outside is going to occur. So you have to be consistent in addressing that behavior, no matter where, when, or how.
Even if parents have not corrected the behavior immediately, if they find themselves in this situation where this has been going on for a while, it doesn't mean that it can't still be corrected. It's going to be more difficult.
It is. My saying, and I think yours too, address the behavior when they're 2 and not 6'2". Yeah. So it's far easier to obtain, reset, and provide appropriate, behavior that you can keep reinforcing at a young age, where the foundation of that is set and you can build on those skills. But once they reach a certain age and you have to strip that behavior back down to its core, is a lot of work. And this is coming from somebody who does that type of work, right? It's a lot of work to strip that behavior down to a neutral zone and then rebuild it with positive behavior.
Let's talk about some strategies.
Okay. First of all, I'd like parents to look at, my number one thing is to tell them, make sure that there's no medical reason for this type of behavior, right? And one of them that I just spoke about earlier is teething in toddlers, right? So that is generally, I see across the board as the number one reason for a lot of toddlers biting at that age. So just rule out any medical issues that could be causing a distressing or painful experience for the person. So rule that out first, and then we can then start looking into more of the behavior versus a physical response to a situation.
Yeah, we know that autistic people can also have gastrointestinal issues. It tends to be pretty high. So if you're in pain or you're in discomfort, you imagine as a neurotypical person, I'm guessing, if you have a massive headache, it's really hard not to be irritable and not to be snippy and maybe not to take that out on someone else. And you can't expect an autistic person to have better control over that than you would.
And you add into the fact that they're finding it difficult to regulate at the best of time, and you put that combination together and you're going to get an outburst. Yeah.
So you're right. I had that one too. I think the most consistent strategy that I came across in literature is applied behavior analysis.
That is a controversial subject, and we had spoken about it in one of our previous podcasts.
Episode 5, I'll put a link.
Okay, wonderful. So ABA is a very effective strategy, and this is one of the times where, as somebody who deals specifically with kids with behavior and safety plans on a daily basis, I implement the ABA strategies in order to provide a safe environment, not just only for the student that I'm working with, but for those around them and the staff that are involved. So this aspect of education, I take a very serious tone with it, right? And it is very structured. It is, and it's very draining. It's very draining for everybody involved. I can honestly tell you that. It's draining for the person who's displaying the behavior. It's draining for the person who is addressing the behavior, both mentally, physically, emotionally. And it's draining for those that are around them and experiencing this and witnessing this, right? So it at first, it is exhausting, but as you get better and understanding what the functional behavior is and the strategies that I put into place, it does improve.
That's well put. I think whether or not you agree with using applied behavior analysis as a strategy, the beginning of that, if it's done well, would be a functional behavior assessment. And I think that is a good strategy, regardless of whether or not you're going to use ABA.
Yeah. So that was one of my one in my top three is creating, and I put it down as a behavior log for those who do not know how to do the ABCs of, in order to understand what the functional behavior is. I'm talking more of a clinical approach to it, right? And you haven't got the equipment to track and necessary. So keep a behavior log at home, right? And specifically, record the date, the time, and be specific about what happened right before the behavior and what happened right after the behavior. And you track this for a little bit of time. And when you translate that data, it is amazing how quickly and obvious the functional behavior is.
Right. You're going to see a pattern.
Yes, very, very quickly.
And once you see that pattern, then you can say, I see. This is the part where we're having difficulty, and this is what I need to address.
Yes. So behavior logs is going to be in my top three. So medical reasons, behavior log, and the second one I have, and I see this constantly, and it's physical or sensory, right? Kids become very dysregulated. Let me give you a situation. We go from summertime clothing and we go into fall and winter clothing. So if you have a person that loves having shorts on and flip-flops or sandals, and the transition of weather occurs and now they have to wear long pants and long shirts, now the sensory aspect comes in. Now all of this material is on top of them. It's a different type of material, and you can literally see them squirming in their own skin because now they have to recondition their bodies to wearing clothes in a different manner, and it is uncomfortable.
Let me tell you, that's not just kids. I have trouble with this every single year. And although I don't have aggression because of it, it's hard. It is a terrible thing to get used to wearing clothing a certain way and then having to switch to other clothing. That takes some time for me.
It does.
And it is painful every single time that happens. Like, I don't get better at it over time. It is just something that I have to go through.
So, a lot of times I go, look at the environment, look at the situation. Is there a physical response to something or a sensory response to something? You're going from being out and it's sunny and warm and it's bright, and then the days start to shorten. And, a lot of people, whether they're neurotypical or neurodivergent, experience winter blues. So, but when it comes to a person with autism, that's magnified, right? They feel the effects of that far more severely than we would. And you add the inability to communicate that need, it really magnifies, their response to a situation.
Or even to recognize that that's what's happening.
Yes. Yeah. And I know there are situations where you have kept a log, for certain pain factors in Peter. And we realized, and you were, because of that, you were able to get a diagnosis for what causes the leg pains in Peter.
That's right.
Yeah. So behavior logs do work.
Very
effective tool.
For anyone who's interested, he actually has chronic recurrent multifocal osteomyelitis.
It's quite the mouthful.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
That's not cool. But I think he's outgrowing it. A lot of kids outgrow that by the time they're 18. So he's almost there.
Yeah. Fingers crossed.
Yep.
Okay. What's your next one?
The next strategy I have is functional communication training.
Yes. Once again, I'm going to go back to ABA. Functional communication training needs to be done explicitly in order to be effective. And when you apply that, when you use ABA strategies, the response to learning that is really, really good.
So let's give an example. That's like getting a child to use the picture exchange communication system.
Yes.
Right? We always abbreviate that to PECS. And they're basically just little pictures of your everyday objects or people, Sometimes they're just little cartoon images, and sometimes we use actual photographs for it.
So when you're implementing that type of communication, you start with the actual picture, and then the child is able to correlate that very quickly, right? And then from that you go to more of an abstract picture, because then it's easier to condense it, and it's far more portable, and it's commonly used in the community. So at first, when we're introducing this communication system, we actually use whether they want the banana, so we actually take a picture of a banana, not a drawing of a banana or an abstract version of it. And then put it in, and all we're requesting is just the picking up of that picture of that peck, and then just handing it to us,
Or
right?
even just pointing to it.
Or initially, any form of thinking in the right direction of communication, you're going to reward it. It's like, that's what I want you to do. And sometimes, not sometimes, a lot of the times I find that students don't know what the physical response is being required from them, right? So once they do it 2 or 3 times, then they're like, oh, is that it? That's pretty easy. And then you automatically get there. Here we go. Here we go. And then you will have peaks and valleys and plateaus in any type of learning, right? So at first it's going to be, like, oh, I'm getting what I want every time I do this, so I'm going to do it more often because I want this, I want this, I want this. And all of a sudden, and then it gets to the point like, okay, well, this is a lot of work. Okay, so I'm just going to go revert back to pointing because this is a lot of work. So you need to stay the course on this communication factor. You have to stay the course. And you're going to sometimes take 3 steps forward and 2 steps back. But as long as you're still moving in a forward direction, keep at it. There is no set time for learning. And we as adults are still learning. So please use the same analogy for kids, right?
So Peter, being non-speaking, when he was really little, if he wanted something, he would grab my hand and throw my hand towards the thing that he wanted. And he didn't use PECs for very long because he didn't like it. But when we introduced PECs for him, he could very quickly point to whatever he wanted to get. Like he got that really,
Yes,
really quickly.
very quickly.
He really needed to have a better communication device in order to communicate with me than just those pictures. So he now uses an iPad with the app on it called Touch Chat. But there are other ones out there. I personally really like Touch Chat, but he started off with ProLoquo, ProLoquo to go, which is what a lot of the schools in Ontario use. But to me, that was not as good of a program as Touch Chat is.
Yeah, I think Touch Chat is great for learners that are academically a little bit more advanced, that have good basis in reading skills. Their literature is good, and I find that it trends more towards kind of preteens and teenagers that they love the lingo that's used or access to the lingo that it's used and the format in which they can quickly navigate through that. ProLoco to go is is also a great tool when introducing it to much younger learners. I find I have a lot more success with younger learners with that.
Right. And to access these things, you can talk to your school, right? The speech and language pathologist at school, or privately, speech and language pathologist privately, because getting that program is not enough. You need to learn how to use it yourself, and you need to know all of the tools around that. So that is a whole thing unto itself.
Yes.
My next one that I have for strategies are reinforcement strategies.
Okay. So my number 4 was your response. Okay. So we've ruled out medical, we've ruled out physical, we've got a behavior log going. We kind of know what the indicators are, or, the triggers to bringing the onset of this behavior. What is your response? So my number 4 was what is your response? And I always say to parents, your response needs to be quick and it needs to be consistent and it has to be in every single environment. So you can say it cannot be delayed. It has to be instant, right? So that they can associate the response to that particular behavior. You cannot allow lagging time because to them, their minds could be moving very rapidly, right? So you have to keep pace with that. So you need to be within 3 seconds, you've got to be able to respond to that behavior. So it takes a lot of mindfulness and focus on the person who is the behavior is being targeted against. And you need to intervene quickly, consistently, and across all environments.
And remain calm.
Absolutely remain calm. I keep forgetting to add these strategies in because this is something I do every day and it's automatic. I'm autopilot on these. So sometimes doing these podcasts has been a phenomenal learning curve for me because I go, oh, I have to actually do a task analysis on how I do things and break it down to its small teachable components and put it out there so people understand it.
Yeah,
So.
it is interesting. And I didn't have to deal with this behavior. So it was really interesting to me to go and learn about all of these things and how they're implemented. Because I did notice too that some of these strategies I just did. I didn't know that was a strategy. That was just my natural way of dealing with a behavior.
Yeah. So part of the response is your facial expression, right? People go, at first, while you're trying to figure out what the functional behavior is, your facial expression needs to be neutral, right? You're not, because you are not certain that your facial expression is what the desired response is from whoever is being aggressive. So they might want to pinch you because of the exaggerated facial expression that you might make, right? So your facial expression needs to stay neutral. That is one of the key responses. Quick, consistent throughout environments, and it has to be neutral.
And
right?
consistent language. Like some of the
Yes.
language that I picked up from you was, excuse you.
Yeah.
Excuse you. Right? And it's amazing how that just stops people. Just that alone just stops people.
Yeah.
Right?
So that's one of the next strategies is limited verbal direction, right? Because they are in a heightened state right now. So it just has to be one or two words, right? And and I think one of the good examples is excuse you, but when it is quite aggressive behavior, I always associate a word that is not used commonly. And my word is,
it's not acceptable.
there you go. Because we use no in everyday language. Would you like calamari?
No, thank you.
Right? Would you like to take a bath in the snow?
No, thank you.
So we don't realize how much we use the word no in everyday conversation. So when you hear that word no, it lacks the power and the meaning to go with it, right? But when you use a word that is not used in everyday language, like not acceptable, how often do you hear that?
Well, I've heard it quite often, but I think most people have probably not. And I think saying excuse you is like saying stop and pay attention to what I'm saying to you. So you use those two in combination quite a bit, like excuse you, that is not acceptable.
Yeah. It's not so much as in the literal meaning of the words, right? It's that when I use them, I'm asking for a certain response. And regardless of the situation, when I say excuse you or not acceptable, I automatically get a pause in that behavior. And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that pause so I can intervene and say, this is not acceptable, this is, and set those boundaries. So, but I do it very quickly and I do it repetitively and and I'm persistent.
And let me tell you, that lasts a really long time because Peter was 13 the last time you worked with him in a school setting. And now at 17, I can say to him, "Excuse you." And he will dead stop whatever he is doing, like, "Oh, what just happened? What am I going like?" And you can see him processing, what was I doing that is I'm gonna get that that's not acceptable.
Yeah. So that is, those two keywords, and limiting it to that consistently allows you to be able to intervene and then reinforce and then apply the type of behavior that you would like to see from them.
And it's hard to give explicit examples because every situation is different.
Yes, it is. And each child is different, right? And each learner is different. So, but it is a consistent, I can honestly tell you, in a variety of circumstances, situations, levels of learners, it's like a magical, combination for me. So, so yeah.
So let's go back to reinforcement strategies.
Okay.
Is that your next one?
Yes, go for it. So,
Okay, you take it away. This is your wheelhouse.
reinforcement strategies is, first of all, I want to ensure that the person that I'm working with, or the student that I'm working with, is safe, right? And whoever the person that they are targeting, whether it be myself or anybody else, that they're safe. So my initial response is to ensure safety, right? And I will do that quickly, effectively. There are multiple approaches that you can take. Sometimes it just requires your physical, placing myself in the middle of the two in order to prevent one from occurring, going off, targeting the other. And other times it could just be a verbal prompt to just say, "Excuse you, that's not acceptable," right? Other times, in some more severe circumstances, it would requires physical intervention, right? And it does involve, as you said, sometimes, a lot of time, we have to then resort to BMS strategies of a single person restraint or a two-person restraint, depending upon the situation, the size of the student,
What is
what is
BMS?
occurring. It's behavior management system. So it is meant to diffuse a situation in order to provide us, safety for ourselves, the person that we're involved with, and those around us.
And that is training that you have received through the school board.
Through the school board, and through, like, if you go and you take formal education and get a degree as an educational assistant, or they do teach you that. And crisis prevention is also one of the strategies in which, we learn on how to diffuse situations.
Is that something that a parent could learn?
Yes, absolutely. A parent could learn that. It's great because you can address behavior that is like, and I'm talking about, if we put a level 1 to 10, I'm talking about BMS interventions are coming into play when it's like an 8, 9, or 10, right? But it doesn't have to be at its highest point. BMS can be used by just, like you said, taking Peter's hands, holding them, and saying, "That's not acceptable," right? You're just saying what you're doing with your hands is not welcoming, right? So what you can do at that point is you can take their hands, put it together, and say, "No, thank you," right? So the ones that I've got is, the ones that I've got is, if your child is a person that likes to pinch, oops, sorry, Kim, you're going to provide a strategy of, they're getting a sensory response from pinching. They're getting a response from you. It could be attention seeking. They're actually needing a sensory response to that. So in saying, instead of pinching me, give them an opportunity to go and access something that they can pinch or squeeze, right? For instance, like a spongy ball, right? They can pinch or squeeze that. Or you can give them a fidget toy in order to keep that, that aspect of their fingers moving and engaged, in order for them to regulate their bodies, in order to think about what you're saying, right? You can't listen to two people having conversations, right? You can only focus on one. Some students require movement or being able to activate one aspect of their body in order to engage the other, right? As a parent, you will know your child best, and you know what works for you and what works for them, right? So pinching, give them something else to focus and access that sensory need, right? Biting could be a sense of teething, right? If it is a sensory need that they have to bite, you can get chew jewelry, right? That they can access, or chewing gum or a hard candy, just to have that sensory aspect in their mouth is turned on. It hasn't got an on-off switch, right? Or it's a very delayed on-off switch. So give them the ability to do that.
And knowing these things have to be appropriate for your child. So we know that hard candies can be choking hazards. Don't give them to little kids.
But chew jewelry is, right? So you've got to evaluate the situation in regards to that, and apply. In regards to pulling, right? You can do the things, you can ask them to pull a wagon instead, or if you're in a home, there's a rope that you can attach, so you can allow them to access that pull, necessary pull, push, pinch. All of these aspects give them the opportunity to act something that provides them the release. An occupational therapist is a great go-to person in order to access a lot of these functional behavior sensory needs. They're going to provide you that.
If you're trying to document these things, if you're using that data tracking and you can't figure out what's happening, take that data to an occupational therapist.
Yep.
And that's their job. They will help you decipher the information that you've gathered.
And they're very good at it. So, and they have access to a lot more sensory items than we do, right? Or we wouldn't normally think of applying a certain sensory item to meet a certain sensory need. So
I'm sure I've told this story before, but when Peter was 2, the first time he went to the occupational therapist, he was running circles, and that's all he would do. He would just run in circles and run in circles. And she said that was vestibular motion. I can't remember the episode we talked about this in. I'm so sorry. I'll try and find that and look it up. And she said that we can redirect that. And she put him on top of a huge exercise ball and rolled him belly first back and forth, right? Head towards feet, feet back and forth, and sang a little song. And it was like magic that worked. And he no longer had to run circles.
yeah. And you and I would have gone, what's a yoga ball got to do with running around in circles?
Exactly.
Right? So that's their job. That's where they're professionals. That's where they're specialists, and use it to your advantage.
Right. So vestibular motion is just that movement, right? And that movement was still obtained in a different way. So
Yeah.
he that met his sensory need in a different way, to provide him with that feedback that he needed in order to be able to focus.
Yep. Okay. I'm going to let you jump in and give me some of yours. And then if we don't overlap on these, then I'll continue with some of mine.
Okay. So part of what you were talking about is with sensory needs, I have creating a safe and calm environment.
Okay.
Right. So having adjustable or dim lighting, if someone is really sensitive to lighting, having sensory items available to them. And those could be so many things, like weighted blanket, a swing, different textures, different fidget toys, whatever that person needs to help them self-regulate.
I have that in as, kind of my proactive strategies, right? Rather than a reactive strategies. So one of the proactive strategies is build this into a routine, right? Build sensory accessing opportunities into your routine every day. Especially when you're first targeting a certain behavior, put it in before and put it in, and see if it reduces the behavior, right? And it helps you narrow it down. So once that behavior is reduced, then you're able to now focus on replacing that behavior, which is more appropriate and safer for them and for everybody else. Build it into your routine. I find a lot of kids either that are overstimulated or understimulated when they go into a snoezelen room. It is a room set up that specifically to either reduce oversensory needs or to elevate those who are not that are not overstimulated. So it does both, right? For those kids who are anxious and high and full of energy, and you go into a snoezelen room, it's a dark room.
I can't understand the word you're saying.
Snoezelen. I'm focused on it.
Sorry, I was just like, I don't know what you're saying right now, and now I'm hyper focused on it.
Okay, we'll put the definition on that.
Could you spell it?
Oh my God.
No? Okay.
No, not right now.
I'll put it in the description.
Because now you've got my mind thrown off. Okay, we'll put it in. It is, it's a dark environment, and usually we have either a bubble tube or a lava lamp. We have lights that project onto the ceiling. We've got calming music in there. We've got alternative seating. So whether it's a bean bag or and weighted blankets, everything that a lot of times kids go to access those sensory needs is pretty much in this room.
So I'm going to call that a sensory room.
A sensory. Yeah. And sometimes we also have a diffuser going with aromatherapy in it, which activates our body into releasing certain hormones and to help us calm.
Right. You often hear that lavender is a very relaxing fragrance. And of course, that's not going to work for someone who is overly sensitive to smell.
Yes. Okay. So that is one of the areas I say build it in, and then it'll help. It really does help. And even if they're in crisis, it is a good opportunity to send them in there and allow them to calm, right? So that is one of your proactive strategies and your reactive strategies.
So you mentioned briefly building in routine. Having a routine and having clear expectations can help reduce behaviors.
Yes, it does. Because it's going to reduce anxiety. Sometimes the unknown for kids and unstructured, it's too overwhelming.
Not just for kids.
Yep, apparently for adults too. Okay, what's your next one?
So part of that is, letting someone know ahead of time when there's going to be a change in that routine.
Yes, that is a good strategy. So usually, one of the things I would do is say, we're going to, in 5 minutes, this is coming up, this is what we're going to do. And I go, and I get my student, if possible, if they're verbal, or to even just give me a hand signal to say 5 minutes, and I'll go in 5 minutes, we are going to, and then they'll repeat where we're going to be going. So I know what I've said has been acknowledged and understood. And then in 2 minutes, I'm going to say, okay, we've got 2 minutes left. We're going to, do that. And I go, how many minutes left? And they'll say 2, right? So, got another acknowledgement. So when the timer does go off and I say, it's time to go now, I always allow my student, if it's, got like 30 seconds left of something that they're doing, or they've got 1 or 2 pieces left in order to complete the task, I'm going to allow them to complete the task, because it's going to set them up for success. Because now they can move on, because they've got closure from one, they're able to move on to the other, and they know what's coming next. So the unknown has been taken away, and they're ready for this.
And sometimes you're going to need longer processing time for that change in routine.
Yeah.
And that could be days.
It could be days.
Right? Like,
yep.
If you say to someone, hey, I want to introduce you to someone new and we're gonna have coffee in the afternoon, then you don't say the next day, oh, actually, be there for 6 o'clock because we're actually gonna have like dinner and have 4 new people coming in for you to meet.
I wonder who would do that.
I don't know who would do that, but that was not cool.
Okay.
Another strategy, modeling appropriate behavior.
Yes, that I had one of mine too, right? So that was going to be modeling appropriate behavior, and that could be done in physically modeling it behavior, verbally, and then you can also use social stories, right? What does it look like when it is not appropriate? What does it sound like? How does it feel when somebody is the recipient of it? And what is more appropriate? What is appropriate behavior? So break it down, right? And make sure that your social stories are always factual. Don't leave it in abstract meaning, right? So, and and this is a go-to, right? You read it often, and you will find that kids will often pick up the book and read it or read the social stories just to, get that memory aspect going again.
Do you find that the opposite can be true? Like if this isn't going to be for everyone, obviously, but if they're playing violent video games or if they're watching violence on television, do you think that sometimes for some people that might influence their behavior?
I think it influences behavior across the board, whether you're neurodivergent or neurotypical, right? When you're exposed to this and it is considered a norm, then you're going to conduct yourself in a manner that it is normal, right? So intervening and saying, actually, no, this is not normal. And for these reasons, right? You can't just say, oh, this is not normal, and then that's it. No, well, that's not gonna work for me. Give me a reason why it's not normal.
And I
Right.
mean, not everyone watches something aggressive and becomes aggressive, but I think for certain individuals, that differentiation might be more difficult.
It especially in autism, it's taken literally, right? We've spoken about literal language in previous episodes, and when we've said, oh, it's raining cats and dogs, some people who have not heard those terms and what the meaning of that term is will literally go to the window to see if it's raining cats and dogs, and they'll turn around and just say, it's just raining, I don't see cats and dogs.
And that does not make someone stupid. Okay, we're not talking about being stupid. It's like I think when we were talking about that, I gave an example of my son Alex. I said to him when he was really little, okay, go crawl into bed, and he literally got on his hands and knees and crawled into bed. He's not stupid. He was just following my direction, literally.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? That's nothing to do with intelligence. It's just literal thinking.
Yes, it is literal thinking. So, so to them, when they watch something, and it is so, nowadays, everything is done so magnificently well that it's hard to differentiate what's real and what's not. So literal language can sometimes get you into a lot of trouble.
Another strategy I have was teaching self-regulation.
That's a big one. Sorry. I'm going to try and pick up, show you the meaning of the room before we get to the end of this, because I know it's going to bug you. That is an ongoing lesson. Okay, so regulation skills can be taught by providing alternative behaviors. So going back to, providing them sensory needs for pull, push, hitting, right? Instead of saying or squeezing or, it's like, if I really have the need to feel that pounding or that pressure, you're going to teach them more acceptable behavior on that, right? And so one of the strategies, like a kid likes to hit, likes that, that pressure and that bound and whatever that causes them to seek that. Provide an alternative, right? Just, okay, instead of hitting me, right? You can, and you need to release all of that anger. You can excuse yourself and you can go to somewhere where you can access something that you can release that physical tension, right? Whether it's on, I usually do not prefer to do body on body. I'd like to say, okay, we'll go, let's use, my go to is those wobbly dolls, the ones that are water weighted and they move back and forth and stuff. Or a baseball bat with they're balls that have, they're very light. So when you hit them, it doesn't go too far, right? So it's like, okay, get your baseball ball holder, like the stand, and hit it, right? So that hitting gets you to release all of that. And it's far more appropriate. So I try and find appropriate releases versus anything else.
Right. I'm processing that through, and I can remember that Peter got a gift one year, which was one of those gopher games, where the gophers pop up and you take the rubber hammer and you hit them. And I can imagine that being sort of a similar feeling, only now it's fun because you're looking for this gopher to pop up like those carnival games.
Yes.
Right.
And it's socially acceptable, right? And, and then it also gives you I'm always the one that's thinking outside of the box here, and how else can you, and then it can be inclusive. You can have other kids join in. And, now this is not just, this person's strange singular means of doing this. It becomes, no, this is great for everybody else, right? And it peer-on-peer interaction. So I'm always looking to be able to layer my learning onto that.
Other self-regulation could be breathing techniques, or really important to allow non-harmful stimming.
Yes. I know a lot of people will, like you said, you like to swear, right? Actually, there's a lot of research behind swearing, especially in Tourette's, right? When you're dealing with people who have Tourette syndrome, the F word it's not so much as the meaning of the word, it's how your tongue is placed against your palate and how it feels like internally, right? A lot of people get a lot of release, emotional release when they use that. So at first I'm like, oh my God, like what's with the F word all the time, right? When I was learning about Tourette's. And when I had a speech therapist and an occupational therapist break it down to the physical components of how that word is formed in someone's mouth and what sensory release it gives them, I was like, oh yeah, go for it. Every single time you need to release that, but excuse yourself or keep it in a soft manner so that nobody else around you is going to be offended by it.
I as you're talking about that, I'm like, yeah, that particular word feels really good because the F is like your whole facial movement when you're doing the F sound, and then it ends with the really, really hard K, right? Like that feels good.
Yeah,
that feels good.
So yeah, so
hey, also swearing increases your pain tolerance. That is a proven fact.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're feeling dysregulated, you're in pain, and it helps you cope with the amount of pain that you're feeling. Like, I'm all for it.
Yep.
I don't do it at other people.
No, you don't do it at other people. It's not harmful to other people, because when you do it to other people, now it becomes, the verbal abuse, right? The verbal aggression. So you've got to teach the subtleties of that.
And I had someone visiting me, and I needed to let it out. And I did that in the kitchen. They were not in the kitchen at the time, but they could hear me, And Alex came into the kitchen to ask me something. So I stopped and I said, oh, hi, honey, what do you need? And he's like, oh, I just wanted to know, blah, blah, blah. And I said, oh, okay. Yep, no, that's fine. And off he went. And that person looked at me and said, you just went from 100 swearing at the sink to being, oh, hi, honey, what do you need? And he was like, how can you? And I said, one has nothing to do with the other. I'm letting something out over there. Alex does not deserve that from me. And I said, and you can tell he's not bothered by me doing that, or he would never have come into the kitchen and interrupted me. He felt safe and confident enough to come in while that was happening because he knows it's not directed at him.
That is the ultimate behavior that I would teach, strategies and to get to, right? Is being able to do what helps us regulate while still allowing those around us to feel safe and secure to entering into your bubble, right? To intervene, or if necessary, say, hey, can I help you? Or I need help in your circumstances, right? So that is the ultimate learning goal for me. And it takes a long time. It's slow, it's methodical, and it takes time.
Because sometimes swearing like that, even if it's not pointed at someone else, other people can feel it and be impacted by it. Mm-hmm. And I made a point of teaching my kids that if I'm doing that, that's nothing to do with you. That is purely just for me because I'm feeling this way and this helps me not feel this way.
And it's excellent regulation skills, and it is, and you've taught your kids that this is a safe boundary, right? The boundary stays within yourself and not going to be directed at others. Excellent, man.
The last one that I have is providing choices, because sometimes a person might need a sense of control.
Yes, I agree with you, but to me, that comes at a later stage, right? So when you are in crisis, that is not a time to give somebody a choice, right? When somebody is in crisis, your first priority is to ensure their safety and your safety and safety of those around you. And when they are at a state where you will know your child, you will know the person, when you can interject and say, would you like to stay here or would you like to go, right? You will find the perfect window where you can step, and that's when you give them the choice and limit it to something that's not going to overstimulate them or re-aggravate the situation and make it worse.
Yeah, that's well put.
Yeah, and choice is far better as a proactive strategy, and and possibly a reactive strategy when the situation is right.
That's all of mine. Do you have anything else?
That's right. Okay. So we did talk about providing opportunity for sensory and relaxation. I think one of the other aspects to aggression is when to seek professional assistance, right? And that doesn't mean that you are not doing your job as a parent. In fact, it is you doing your job as a parent or a caregiver or whatever role that you are playing in the situation. Sometimes it goes beyond a behavior log. Sometimes it requires very specialized help. So you might need a behavioralist to come in. You might need to seek, occupational therapists. You might also have to go to see a psychiatrist, right? So you're going to have to seek medical assistance or professional assistance based on the situation that you're dealing with, right?
Or even your family doctor to rule out any physical things that are causing this behavior.
Yeah, absolutely. And make sure whoever you are going to be looking at to providing these services has experience with kids that have autism, right? Because it's certainly a very different approach. So just do your due diligence when seeking, professional assistance.
Yeah. Qualified professionals.
Yes, please. Lastly, I have supporting yourself and those around you. A lot of times when you are a family of just more than one child and there's other children in the family, you've got to also prioritize their well-being, right? as well as your own. And you need to get some respite for yourself, because I'm going to use the plane analogy. If, they often say, if the plane's going down, you put the oxygen mask on yourself first before you help others, because you're not going to be good to anybody if you're passed out and you can't put the oxygen mask on somebody else. So you've got to put the oxygen mask on yourself and provide yourself, the emotional, the mental, and the physical respite, because this is a marathon. This is not a sprint. And in order for you to complete this marathon, and you're going to have to you're going to have to provide self-care, whether that's through respite, whether that's by having, family members come and support you by giving you a break, and focus on the kids who are affected by this. A lot of times kids that live in a household with other kids, siblings that are violent, are often the ones that experience the most amount of aggression towards. Peer on peer is generally or the one that they feel the safest with. And so you need to be able to take the time out and look after yourself, and that has to be built in to a schedule and a routine. Because when you build that in, when you're dealing with a person that is demanding all of this energy, and it's built into the routine, the anxiety of you not being there is going to reduce each and every time when it is part of a routine. So please do that.
We have a list of funding resources on our website, which I'll put a link in the description. And a lot of the funding in Ontario will cover respite care. And I think another part of that is also taking care of your emotional needs, like support groups, right? Like join us on our Facebook discussion group, or leave us comments and just talk to us about what's going on, right? Just connecting with someone who's been there, who understands, or who might have a little bit of advice for a particular situation can really go a long way.
It does go a long way, and just being able to talk about it and say you're not alone is key, right? Because a lot of times people feel that they're on this journey by themselves, and you're not. And sharing, your experiences will help others navigate their experience a lot more effectively. And we're going to post the snoezelen room on our website. It is there's a lot of information behind it. I should have actually included the technical terms of it in our discussion over here, but we will put a link on that so what people can actually see what it looks like and try to the best of their ability replicate it.
Okay, that sounds good.
All right, so we were talking about aggression, so which links nicely to our next episode.
Which is?
You tell me.
I have to look that up. I forgot already.
Traits.
Oh, yes.
So
autistic stereotypes.
Yes.
And are they actually harmful?
I think when our episodes, the last 2 episodes link very nicely to this, right? So when you have this type of behavior, then people do they associate it with autism, aggression, and traits, right? So we're going to try and break that up and show you that it is, and give you the research behind it.
Yep.
And until then, have a great day.
We'll see you then. Thanks for tuning in. If you know someone who might find this episode helpful, feel free to share. Also, check out our website and socials linked in the description.